I've taught dozens of drummers how to play jazz, and in this video I'm going to show you the quickest way to go from I already know how to play the drums, but jazz seems too hard, to now I have jazz gigs and I'm playing all the time. And I'll tell you right now, my students have been applying this and they are playing jazz gigs, they're doing it all the time, so it works if you do work it. Now, this video is going to be for you if you meet a couple of requirements. First is that you have coordination. What do I mean when I say this? It means that you can play a couple different drum beats, that you can make a couple little different variations of maybe a rock groove or a funk groove or a Latin groove or something like that. You just have basic coordination on the drum set. It's not your first time. And you have command over your stickings, which means you can probably play a couple of rudiments. Again, you don't have to be a master at this. You don't have to do all 47 or 112 or whatever there is now. You just need to be able to control a couple of basic stickings, okay? The other thing is it helps if you can read, but you don't have to be perfect. If you're able to read enough to have a basic understanding of how rhythms work together, then you're gonna be in pretty good shape. And then a bonus here is you play with people in some way. Maybe you have a band that you play with, you have a couple regular gigs, you've already been sitting in at some jam sessions, stuff like that. If you're gonna do that, then you're gonna be in pretty good shape. The TLDR here is really that you already play the drums. You know how to play the drums, you know how music works, and now you want to transition to playing jazz. Okay, really, the first thing that needs to happen here, the thing that can drive all of the progress if you want to actually become a jazz drummer, is to play with people. A lot of people do this backwards. They say, I want to become a jazz drummer. Okay, what's the drum set 101 of that? Let me go get the coordination book, let me go through some exercises, maybe some transcriptions, read all the notes, try to figure it out from the bottom up. No. It works better if you go from the top down, if you just go to a jam session and sit in. Do your best. If you can play a ride cymbal beat, you can play a basic beat, then just sit in and play. A lot of people, their first time, they're gonna feel a lot of hesitation towards doing that. Like, I'm too afraid, I don't know if I'm good enough for jazz, I never feel like I can play this style. That's okay. I really encourage you to just push through that and see if you can just get up on that stage and play, because I think that you'll find that you're a lot more capable than you think. But if you're not brave enough to do that yet, I encourage you to just go to the session. Just go and hang out, see what's happening. You're gonna have so much context for what happens at a jam session, what you're gonna need to learn to do in order to sit in, and it's gonna give you all the context you need for what you're gonna practice later. And then I would encourage you to make friends, okay? No special tactic here, right? Just be a person, go say hello. This is a room full of people who love what you love. So you already are starting from that place. You can feel really comfortable and confident in that. Just ask them, what are you working on? What are you checking out? Do you have a gig this week? I'd love to come hang out at your gig. Just say hello, be friendly. Let yourself be known. A piece of advice that I got when I first moved to Chicago, great bassist in Chicago, Christian Dillingham, told me, dude, for the first year, just show up at everything and say, hi, I'm Jameson, I'm a drummer. Just let them know who you are, that you're there, and you don't even have to think about will you give me a gig or can I play? Just show up, be a friend. All that stuff will come along the line, okay? You're gonna make friends, and I encourage you to introduce yourself to the person running the jam session. If you just say, hello, I'm Jameson, I play the drums, they'll probably say, oh, do you want to sit in, right? And then it's not so nerve-wracking, they kind of welcome you, right? Or you can say, oh, it's my first time, I just want to watch this time. And they'll be like, well, you need to play some next time, okay? Right? That's the cool thing about this jazz community, is everybody has gone through this phase of going to their first jam session. And so it behooves all of us to make the scene bigger by creating more jazz players so that we can all play music together, we can be more creative, there's more options. So you're gonna find that the people who are running these jam sessions, they're usually not doing it because they're making a ton of money. They're doing it because they want to build the community, and they are the person in the community that fosters that. So that's a great person for you to introduce yourself to, because they're going to be on your side. Once you go to that first jam session, it's going to tell you everything you need to know to start to become a jazz drummer. And that's really when you go into the next phase. So the next phase of this is you realize, oh, I'm at the jam session, I need to be able to comp behind solos, I need to be able to solo myself and not get lost, I need to be able to know the tunes that everybody plays, and then I gotta be able to execute all this stuff because my technique is whacked out or something like that, okay? So let's talk about the first thing, which is comping. Comping is short for accompanying. It's where you're playing drums behind someone's solo. You're playing a groove, you're improvising with them, okay? Now there's a couple things that you're gonna need to get right here. If you've been playing a different style, like maybe you're a rock drummer, maybe you played orchestral percussion your whole life, maybe you're a funk drummer, anything, you're gonna need to start to get the jazz feel. And what that really comes in is the ride cymbal drive, okay? A lot of people, when they start playing jazz on the drums, they have this kind of like looser ride cymbal feel. Right? And it doesn't feel comfortable. It doesn't feel like really driving. We need something that's a little bit more forward momentum. Now, there's a lot of ways to do this, but probably the easiest way to do this at the very beginning is to do what I call the 2+4 ride cymbal, okay? So you're gonna accent 2 and 4 on the ride cymbal. And that creates a very driving motion if you're making sure that you're doing those accents correctly. Because you have those 2 and 4, it creates a low and a high between 1 and 2, 3 and 4, which ensures that there's a consistent drive, okay? Not only do you need to be able to do that, but you have to be able to comp and play different patterns on your snare and bass at the same time while keeping that consistent. Right? That's gonna take some coordination and some figuring out, but once you do it, you're gonna have the right feel, okay? Once you have the right feel, which is really the most important thing, then the next thing you need to figure out is like, okay, I have a good feel and I can comp a little bit, but when do I comp, right? And this is when you're going to need the phrasing of when to comp, okay? So what is phrasing? Phrasing really has kind of two definitions in jazz music, right? The first is like if you were learning Spanish and you want to get the accent right. It's one thing if like a English speaking person like me starts speaking Spanish, it's not going to sound quite right. But if I go live in Spain and I kind of get the inflection and the flow and everything, then it's going to sound more natural. In jazz music, that's the accents, the feel, it's the rhythmic vibe, it's how long or short are certain notes, right? So that's the first kind of phrasing. The other kind of phrasing is more like if you were learning Spanish and you're like, how do I put sentences together? It's one thing to know a couple words in Spanish, but it's another to know kind of like how sentence structure works. It's kind of like grammar, right? That's the kind of phrasing that we need to figure out with our comping is how do we comp in a way that makes sense, okay? I like to think about little phrasing, medium phrasing, and you guessed it, big phrasing, okay? Let's go backwards. So big phrasing is keeping track of big phrases, right? A big phrase in jazz music might be like the form of the song. It's 32 bars. Can you mark the form and play a crash on the bridge? Right? When we get back to the top of the form, can you hit a crash cymbal on beat 1 so that everybody knows where they are? This is going to help the band stay together. It's also going to help you feel confident that you know where you are in the form. Medium phrasing is that same kind of concept, but applied on a smaller scale. So maybe we mark every 4 bars, or more powerfully, something you're going to need to do is phrase with the people you're playing with. You know, maybe the trumpet player leaves a little bit of space. I like to use something called with/against. For example, let's start with against. Imagine that the trumpet player is soloing. Right? I'm waiting until he creates gaps and then I'm jumping in his gaps and it's complementing what it is that he's doing, right? That's what against is, right? We also want to be able to phrase with them, which is I'm trying to predict what they're going to do and jump onto the end of their phrase, right? So something like this. Right? It's really easy because I'm both the soloist and the accompanist. But you want to be able to do this on the fly with other people. That way you can really start to flow with them. If you can get this medium phrasing down, people are going to love playing with you because they're gonna be like, oh, this is someone who listens to me and also challenges me, okay? That's medium phrasing. Little phrasing is more of like the Spanish accent that I was talking about before. So in jazz music, if you comp and you keep everything flat, it sounds kind of weird, right? As opposed to when you get the accents right, where there's low notes, high notes, and you're really expressing yourself with your comping, it sounds like this. Right? That sounds like a jazz drummer because it's got all those little inflections. It's kind of like in Spanish when you get the pronunciation just right, or the rhythm and the flow of how your words fall off your tongue. If you get that right, then you're gonna sound more like a jazz drummer. People are gonna hear it when you play at those jam sessions, okay? Now, you're gonna get all this phrasing, and that kind of tells you how to play things, but you're gonna need a little bit more of like what to play, like what vocab, how, like, I know how to get the accents right, but like what vocab do I need? So that's really where the vocab part comes in. And the way to do this is really just to transcribe. At the beginning, don't go crazy. Don't do an Elvin Jones time transcription where he's playing a bunch of triplets and varying the ride cymbal. No. You need to choose somebody who's very simple, straightforward, somebody like Art Blakey, who keeps the ride cymbal relatively consistent and who plays simple phrases on the snare and bass that make sense. So you're gonna transcribe little chunks, don't do a whole page, just do little chunks, 1 bar of ideas, and get them really comfortable in your own playing so that you can use them in all these different ways that we talked about earlier with the phrasing. Now, once you've done this, you're gonna be able to go to jam sessions and you're gonna be able to play along, basically. You know, you can comp for people when they're soloing, you know where you are in the form, it sounds musical, you sound like a jazz drummer, but guess what? They're gonna look at you at some point and you have to solo, okay? So that's the next thing that we have to focus on, is basically we have to go through a lot of this same process with soloing, okay? So over here, we talked about phrasing and vocab, and we're gonna go through both of those things with soloing. Phrasing, remember, that's both the feel and how we put our ideas together. And then vocab, that's the actual ideas themselves. Now, up to this point, you know, you're a drummer, you've played your rudiments, you've played maybe out of some books, maybe you've been playing with bands, and you've probably learned in a very kind of like sequential, like dots and dashes kind of way, because that's actually the best way to learn that stuff. Like paradiddles, it should be like focusing on the details and building up from there, right? But actually, now that we're in this more abstract soloing phrasing world, we're gonna have to start to zoom out and think in a different way. So the first thing is you're gonna wanna practice trading fours. It's kind of like the easiest to digest solo length. And the way that we do that is we need to be able to solo and play ideas that are 4 bars and know that they are 4 bars just by playing them. Like we feel it kind of, right? Okay, so this is where you're gonna learn how to feel phrasing. What does a 1 bar idea feel like? What does a 2 bar idea feel like? If I do 2 2-bar ideas, what does that feel like? Oh, that makes a 4-bar idea, okay? How do I play a long 4-bar idea? Once you're really comfortable with that, then the trading fours are gonna be good, but you're gonna have ambitions to play full chorus solos, okay? This means like 16, 32 bar solos over the form. And the way that you do this, you're gonna have to be able to chunk together bigger chunks of phrasing. The way that we do this is with something that I call melody mapping, but it's basically just playing a song, you know, one of these jazz melodies that we all know, like Now's the Time, which sounds like this. Ba-doo-bo-dee-ba-da, ba-doo-bo-dee-ba-da, ba-doo-bo-dee, 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 ba-da, right? And then I take that phrasing, ba-doo-bo-dee-ba-da, short phrase, ba-doo-bo-dee-ba-da, another short phrase, ba-doo-bo-dee, ba-doo-bo-dee, ba-doo-bo-dee-ba-da, a longer phrase, and maybe I play it with a different subdivision. So da-ba-da-da-ba-doo-ba, so da-ba-da-ba-ba-doo-ba, ba-ba-da-ba-ba-doo-ba, right? Or maybe I play it with 16th notes. Right? Tongue's getting away from me on that one. But then if I have that phrasing internalized, like short, short, long, and I know that's gonna be 4 bars, then I can improvise freely within that. Right? Now it's starting to sound more free, more relaxed. I can zoom out more, but it enables me to play longer solos, like a full chorus solo, because that chorus maps onto the melody, okay? So you're gonna get that down, but it will start to be restrictive in a way. You're gonna feel like It's kind of simple. It's kind of plug and play. It's always the same thing. And if you're a creative jazz musician like me, you love jazz because it's different every time, because you improvise it, because you get to be in that feeling of creativity, okay? So you're gonna wanna play longer solos and have them be like freer, right? Let's say you wanna play multi-chorus solos, which is 64 bars, 128 bars, 5 choruses, right? Maybe you play an 8-minute solo. Really, to keep that interesting, you're going to have to be able to create your own phrasing. Now, this takes being able to feel a 4-bar phrase, an 8-bar phrase, a 6-bar phrase, switching those out interchangeably. Like maybe the first 8 bars you play 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, right? And then the next 8 bars you play 4, then 4, and then the next 8 bars you play one giant 8-bar phrase. If you can do that, then you can keep your phrasing really interesting. But it's gonna take like really being able to feel what a 4-bar phrase, what a 6-bar phrase, what an 8-bar phrase is, and also creating kind of forms, right? Jazz songs have forms like AABA. Can you create an AABA in your solo? Or maybe you can create an ABBA, right? Which is where you play something different, play the different thing again, and then play the original thing. That's ABBA. Or can you make like a ABCA? And these can map onto 4, 6, or 8-bar phrases. If you can do this, you're gonna be able to improvise solo after solo, that they're all different, they all sound incredible, they all flow. But here's the thing, at the beginning you're gonna feel like this is very like zoomed in and very like I'm figuring out all these details. But if you do this, it's kind of like weightlifting. Then when you go to get on the stage, you can kind of just not think and natural phrases will just come out of you, okay? So you have to do this work in advance so that you can feel really, really comfortable with the soloing, all right? Now, all this phrasing work that you did, it was really, really valuable so you know how to put ideas together in a way that makes sense. But it's like, what ideas am I gonna play? So that's where the vocab comes in, all right? The way I see it, there's really 3 phases that we need to go through here. One is copy, then we have to create, and then we want to deepen. Okay, copy. So what we're gonna do for copy is we're going to transcribe, which is where you listen to something and figure out how to play it, simple chunks. A lot of people, when they get their first ideas, here's how they do it. They transcribe from a book, or they watch a YouTube video, which I guess I'm making a YouTube video right now, but I'm trying to point you in the right direction. That is a little too zoomed in. We need to get it from the source. We need to get it from Philly Joe Jones, using it in context so we know how to use it. And a lot of people, they go and they transcribe a whole 24-page solo, they never finish it, and by the time they do finish it, they've moved on with their life and they don't want to practice it, so it never comes out in their playing. What you need to do instead is find one bar from a Philly Joe Jones solo that you like, and figure out how to play it. And it's gonna take all the pressure off because it's something small that you can digest. And then you take that simple chunk and boom, you apply it to all this phrasing that you did. Fourths, full chorus, multi-chorus, melody mapping, all of that stuff. And then all of a sudden you can take this one idea and you can use it in ways that make it so that you can flow, that you can relax, which is ultimately the goal. Now, at the beginning, it's gonna feel very plug and play. It's gonna feel like you're just spitting out this one Max Roach idea or this one Art Blakey idea and it just sounds the same. And you're gonna feel like, man, I don't wanna just like be a Max Roach clone. I want to sound like Jameson. I want to sound like myself. That's when you have to go to the create phase, okay? So the way that you do this is you take an idea and you mold it around like clay. You kind of say like, what is this idea? What is it made of? It's got a drag, it's got a paradiddle, right? Here's a drag paradiddle phrase, right? Oh, okay. So what do I like about that? Well, I like that it mixes 2 rudiments. Okay, so, you know, how do I extend this? Can I make it longer? Right? Can I make the paradiddle part longer? Oh, that's interesting. What if I switched it and did it on different hands? Right? What if I did it across the drums? Oh, now this is starting to sound really different. There's starting to be all these creative things that I can use. If you mold it like clay, then you discover all these ideas that are inspired by somebody like Max Roach or Philly Joe or Art Blakey, but they sound like you because of the way you molded them, the way that you changed them. Now you're gonna have all this vocabulary that came from you, but works. It sounds like a jazz musician, okay? Here's the thing, a lot of times if you just do these 2 steps and you're somebody who is like a rock drummer or a rudimental drummer or something like that, it's not gonna feel right. You're gonna have this feeling of like, it doesn't feel like jazz, it doesn't feel right. people give me advice that it doesn't feel right, you know? And that's really abstract. This is the part where you're going to have to deepen. What this comes down to is remember earlier when I was talking about when you're learning Spanish and you got to get the accent right? It comes to the depth of your accent, right? Somebody like Philly Joe Jones, there's so much nuance in the way he's phrasing, how the ride cymbal feels, how the subdivision feels, how the accents and the taps, the different heights and the touch, right? You have to get all of that deeper and deeper into your playing. And the way that you do this is by doing what we call an etude transcription. This is very different from what we did up here. This is like a creativity transcription, right? It's transcribing for inspiration so that you can go and create your own ideas. An etude transcription is where you say, I'm gonna take this one Greg Hutchinson solo, I'm gonna memorize it, I'm gonna play every single note right, and what you'll realize from doing that is like, oh, I'm really bad at 6-stroke rolls. I'm bad at drags, or my heights get jacked up when I try to play accents and taps. And it's gonna force you to play the same thing over and over again, refining it, getting it better, taking this big cotton candy and compressing it down into a little hard candy that's very sweet, right? That's what you need to do in order to deepen yourself. This is how you get depth. This is how you become somebody who people listen to and they're like, that's like a real jazz musician. And by the way, there's a lot of nuance here. There's gonna be times where you should be copying versus deepening, and if you deepen at the wrong time, it's the wrong phase. You know, there's gonna be times where you should be focusing on your comping or your soloing. I highly suggest that you get a mentor. This is something that I help people with. So if you want help with your jazz drumming, I do mentor people with this. Reach out to me. There should be a link to contact me somewhere in the description here, okay? So now you got the comping dialed in, you got the soloing, it's sounding good, but it's like, what are you comping and soloing over? And this is the stage where you are going to need to learn tunes. You need to know the tunes that people play at a jam session, okay? And there's a lot of ways to do this. A lot of people will just go get the lead sheet, or they'll, you know, try to memorize the form of everything. That's all good. But there's really a faster way. You see, when I learned this stuff, I never did that. I really just went to the jam session in my local town at this pizza place, and I heard the tunes that people played, and then they were kind of just ringing in my head all week. And because of that, like, kind of brainwashing and just being in the environment where there was context, there was a reason to figure it out, I just learned these tunes kind of naturally. So I recommend trying to replicate that, okay? So the first thing you could do, well, first of all, just go to the jam session. That's why I started with that. But the next thing to do is to, you know, you write down all of the tunes that people play, or maybe you get a list from somebody like me. I have a list of tunes that people play, and you just brainwash yourself with them. You put them on Spotify on a playlist on loop, and you listen to them while you're walking around the house. You listen to them while you're driving to work. You listen to them while you're doing the dishes. And they just kind of come into your subconscious. They become a part of you, so that when you get up and you actually go to play them, it's just like, oh, I just know where this is going. That's what it'll feel like. It'll feel very natural. Then the next thing you want to do is you don't want to just kind of have it in the back of your head. You actually want to apply it. So I recommend going and turning on that playlist and playing along, right? This makes a lot of sense. Just get in and play along. There'll be higher stakes because you'll have to know where you are in the form to stay with the music. And then, of course, the best way to do it is to jam, okay? Again, I recommended at the beginning that you go to a jam session for this reason, but you can also get numbers at that jam session and invite people over to play. It's a little bit more low stakes, it's a little chiller. You can say to them, oh guys, I'm learning this new tune, can we practice this tune together, right? It takes the edge off, it makes it a lot easier, especially if you got some good buddies. Once you do this, you should know the tunes that you need, especially if you're in a good feedback loop of going to these jam sessions and either sitting in or at least listening. Okay, so by now you're playing with people, hopefully. You're comping and soloing like a champ over these tunes that you know very deeply in your subconscious. It's sounding fantastic, but you might find that as you go deeper and deeper into this, as you're trying to play more complex things from the drummers that you love, that sometimes you can't keep the time consistent, or your touch is too harsh, or really it's just things are breaking down at the technique level. There's gonna be things that you can't play right away, okay? So you do need to, along the way, be conscious of your technique and start to fix it. There's certain jazz things that you're gonna have to dial in as you go. The main three that I see people who, you know, already play the drums but wanna figure out jazz, what they struggle with is feel, touch, and flow, okay? So feel is like they start playing bebop and their subdivision feels like this. Right? It's what I would call overly swung. It's a bit stiff. It doesn't feel right. It needs to sound more like, right? A little smoother, a little bit more bounce to it. And the way that you do this, I've seen it time and time again, I've done this with so many people, is by playing melodies. Melody. I'll just make a big D. All right, cool. Playing melodies, okay? So playing something like Doxy by Sonny Rollins. Right? And actually figuring out stickings that lend themselves to those melodies in that feel. For example, you see how there's a dynamic shape to that melody? And if I just played it alternating, it's kind of like I went da 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 da, right? It doesn't match the feel of that melody. But if I use doubles and a sticking we call a rub-a-dub, right, right, left, it swings a lot more. It sounds a lot more like a melody. And if you play along with these melodies, you're going to develop more and more of that feel, okay? The other thing is touch. And the way that we work on this is by using extremes. Two problems that I see most common when people are figuring out this jazz thing is, one, they come from like a rock or rudimental background and they have just a really harsh touch. And that's not playing loud, right? Because I can play high and still have a light touch, as opposed to, right? It's really about the velocity, okay? The other problem that I see people having is going, oh, I'm playing jazz, I'm supposed to play light. It's so light that the time feels kind of wimpy, and also there's no body to the sound. It doesn't feel comfortable. So the way that you do this is really by focusing on extremes. Our body needs us to break muscle memory, okay? And our touch, usually everybody's kind of in a rut with their touch. They're playing the exact same touch for their whole drumming career. They're not really aware of it. So you need to break it by saying, okay, I'm gonna play the highest velocity I possibly can, right? And then describing what that feels like. Oh, it feels harsh. It feels abrasive. It sounds sharp. It sounds pointy. It looks snappy, right? If you can describe what that feels like, then you can manipulate it, okay? And then you do the opposite. You do the other extreme. As soft a touch as possible. Right? You see how that's the same height, but a completely different sound? Right? I'm exaggerating a little bit. Let me do a normal soft touch. To me, that sounds more round. It feels more cushy, right? More padded, more relaxed, okay? And then you have to start to develop like the happy medium, somewhere like this, where it's nice and relaxed, but it also has some body to it, okay? I like to describe like the movement is like I have a salmon in my hand, right? And I'm just kind of flopping it around, right? But it's got some weight to it. And the sound to me is more round, do, 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 instead of dee, 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 right? Once you get that down, then your touch is gonna sound much better. It's gonna make it sound like jazz. That's how you sound like a jazz drummer. It's really a lot about the touch, okay? Or you might have problems with the flow, all right? This is so common. It's kind of like when you're improvising and there's just like a little hiccup. It's just like something just, you're, you know, it just doesn't come out right. And usually there's this feeling from drummers of like, I don't know what's happening. Like it sounds right in my head, but it doesn't come out. Usually this comes from zooming out. You need to get this more zoomed out in order to flow, okay? Think about it like this. Those old computers, when you open up a bazillion tabs on it, they start to like trip up like that, right? And our brains are a lot like that. So if we're drumming and we're thinking of every detail, for example, like every sticking, we're going, right? That's just a lot of zeros and ones. And it's so overwhelming. That's why our brains start to slow down and it disables our flow. In order to get our flow more smooth, we need to zoom out. How do we do that? A good way to do that at that level is by singing what you play. Instead of going every single detail, you just think of the sound of it. Right? It's kind of like going, instead of going cat, you go cat. Bundle it, make it a whole word, right? That's gonna relax you so you can flow a lot more. And just side note, as you get more and more advanced, you're gonna zoom out even more and more, where you're not even thinking about what you're playing. Eventually, you're just thinking about the energy. You're thinking about the people that you're playing with, and things come out super naturally. That's where you start to get those feelings of like, I'm a part of something greater than myself. Now, once you're done with this technique thing, you're playing well. You're sounding like a jazz musician. You're comping and soloing and sounding like a jazz musician. Everything is flowing. Your phrasing and vocab is dialed for both. You know all the tunes that people play. And hopefully you're still doing this first step, because it's kind of a feedback loop. You know, you play with people. It tells you what you need to work on in all of these areas. And then once you get that dialed in, you go back to play with people and test your skills. And then what happens is, as you get better, as you grow, people are gonna hear all of this in you, and they're gonna say, wow, you sound great, man. Do you wanna hang out? Come over for a session. Or, you sound great, man. I wanna call you for a gig. Are you free Friday? And then at those gigs, you're gonna play with better people who are going to challenge these areas of your playing. And that's how you get better and better. That's the reason that most of us are doing this. We want to play with people so that we can be the best versions of ourselves, so that we can confront all our weaknesses and be the best drummer that we can be. And if you do this correctly, by the end of doing this, you're going to be playing gigs, you're going to be sounding great at the jam sessions, and having fun being a real jazz musician. So if you found this video useful, go watch another one of these videos. There should be one over here somewhere. I'll see you next time.